Hello, here we are. I'm over my depression, thank God. And I just want to say this about that if you're a person who suffers with depression. What I get from it is that the most important thing about it is to never believe any of the sad thoughts that come into your mind. When you hear them, just let them pass on through. Definitely don't give them any credence, because in that state, you aren't thinking correctly, and we tend to allow a flood of creepy thoughts, self-deprecating thoughts come in. Don't just know, go in knowing that none of it is true. Okay, don't believe it. That's how I feel about it anyway. So it's a battle, and I've been struggling for a couple days, lots of tears. It's really hard, but today's been a really good day. I'm telling you, mental illness is really problematic, and I don't wonder why I have it. I believe it's inherited. My mother suffered with, or still suffers with, terrible depression. She has all kinds of other problems that I don't envy her for mentally. I'm lucky that I just got out of this with depression. Now, the PTSD is acquired, although being that I feel like I was probably traumatized from birth, perhaps that also is passed genetically. Who knows? But if you're somebody who struggles with mental health issues, I'm right there with you. I empathize. It's challenging. There was a book that was called Touched by Fire, and I thought that was a really neat way to look at depression, that you are touched with something that you do have to deal with. Once again, my advice, not being a therapist or anything like that, my advice is just don't believe anything you hear. All of those negative thoughts going through your mind, just let them roll on through. Say thank you, goodbye. Goodbye. What I do is I grab them and I say, I put that under the blood of Jesus. I put that under the blood of Jesus. And that's how I cope with it. It's hard though, because your brain is telling you that it's time to cry, and it's difficult, so there were lots of tears. It's taken me 2 days to get through it. And here I am back again. So we're going to pick it up with Ezekiel 38. The last thing we read was about Ezekiel and the dry bones. And the Lord asked him to speak life into the dry bones. And he did. And they came together and they lived. Also, if you go to my feed, you'll see some pictures of Ezekiel's first vision, which they call the inaugural vision. And a couple of them have, the hand coming out of the clouds with the scroll. They're interpretations to the best of what he described. Okay, I'm not sure that any of those interpretations really do it justice, but it's something to look at. So take a look at them. Here we go, Ezekiel 38. The word of the Lord came to me. Son of man, set your face against Gog, G-O-G, of the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshach and Tubal. Prophesy against him and say, this is what the sovereign Lord says. I'm against you, Gog, chief prince of Meshach and Tubal. I will turn you around, put hooks in your jaws, and bring you out with your whole army. Your horses, your horsemen fully armed, and a great horde with large and small shields, all of them brandishing their swords. Persia, Cush, and Put will be with them, all with shields and helmets. Also Gomer with all its troops, and Beth Togarmah from the far north with all its troops, the many nations with you. Get ready, be prepared, you and all the hordes gathered about you, and take command of them. After many days you will be called to arms. In future years you'll invade a land that has recovered from war, whose people were gathered from many nations to the mountains of Israel, which had long been desolate. They'd been brought out from the nations, and now all of them live in safety. You and all your troops and the many nations with you will go up, advancing like a storm. You'll be like a cloud covering the land. Okay, I'm going to get bummed out about this little piece of hair. Sorry. This is what I did in the middle of my depression. I did get to do my hair yesterday because I thought anything will pick me up, perhaps, and maybe it did. And so self-care is also very, very important when you're in a depression. Depression's a very sad condition, and nobody can talk you out of it because it's your brain dysfunctioning. And, doing drugs will do that to the brain. It will eat up all the serotonin you've got. I would say that the drugs I did could have lent to it, but I really think that I've probably been depressed my whole life. But it just didn't kick in till around the time my father died. Then a lot of things came rushing at me because my father had always been my protection against my mother, who was abusive to me. So when he died, I felt very vulnerable. All right, so back to it. This is what the sovereign Lord says. On that day, thoughts will come into your mind and you'll devise an evil scheme. You will say, I'll invade a land of unwalled villages. I'll attack a peaceful and unsuspecting people, all of them living without walls and without gates and bars. I'll plunder and loot and turn my hand against the resettled ruins and the people gathered from the nations, rich in livestock and goods, living at the center of the land. Sheba and Dedan and the merchants of Tarshish and all her villages will say to you, have you come to plunder? Have you gathered your hordes to loot, to carry off silver and gold, to take away livestock and goods, and to seize much plunder? Therefore, Son of Man, prophesy and say to Gog, this is what the sovereign Lord says, in that day, when my people Israel are living in safety, will you take notice of it? You'll come from your place in the far north, you and many nations with you, all of them riding on horses, a great horde, a mighty army. You will advance against my people Israel like a cloud that covers the land. In days to come, Gog, I will bring you against my land so that the nations may know me when I am proved holy through you before their eyes. Now, this is interesting because Gog and Magog are mentioned, I believe, in Daniel's prophecy, which we're inching closer to as we go. I don't really remember if they're mentioned in Revelation, but they are mentioned in Daniel's prophecy of the end, okay? So they're definitely players in the end times, and this may be what the Lord is saying, that at the exact right time, I'm going to bring you against Israel, because at the end, all the nations are going to line up against Israel, or I should say Russia, China. This little tiny dot on the map called Israel is going to have the biggest nations in the world surrounding her with guns aimed at her. Okay, but the Lord is going to win the battle because it's written. All right. This is what the sovereign Lord says. You're the one I spoke of in former days by my servants, the prophets of Israel. At that time, they prophesied for years that I would bring you against them. So this is not a foreign prophecy. This is a well-known prophecy that Gog, G-O-G, will come against Israel. Whoever Gog may be. It's someone in the north. At that time, they prophesied for years that I would bring you against them. This is what will happen in that day. What day is that? When Gog attacks the land of Israel, my hot anger will be aroused, declares the sovereign Lord. In my zeal and fiery wrath, I declare that at that time there shall be a great earthquake in the land of Israel. The fish in the sea, the birds in the sky, the beasts of the field, every creature that moves along the ground, and all the people on the face of the earth will tremble at my presence. Okay, so if all the people are going to tremble, this is definitely, once again, another prophecy of the very end that is coming, okay? I will summon a sword against Gog on all my mountains, declares the sovereign Lord. Every man's sword will be against his brother. So you have to wonder if the way the Lord will save Israel from these large nations coming against it will be to do something that we saw happen quite a couple of times way back in the Old Testament when, people were waking up out of sleep, armies were waking up out of sleep and killing each other, okay, and just slaughtering each other until they were vanquished, okay? So I don't know if that's going to happen again, but it sounds like something like that will happen. I will execute judgment on him with plague and bloodshed. I will pour down torrents of rain, hailstones, and burning sulfur on him and on his troops and on the many nations with him. So once again, we don't quite know who Gog is. We think it might be Russia. We don't know who Magog is. Might be China. I don't know. These are northern countries. Now, north is definitely appears to be Russia. But it's saying here, I will execute judgment on him, on his troops, and on the many nations with him. So this is definitely an Armageddon preamble, or a prophecy about the very last moment, the Battle of Armageddon. And so I will show my greatness and my holiness, and I will make myself known in the sight of many nations. Then they will know that I am the Lord, because only the Lord will be able to rescue them at that point. Ezekiel 39, Son of man, prophesy against Gog and say, this is what the sovereign Lord says. I'm against you, Gog, chief prince of Meshach and Tubal. I will turn you around and drag you along. I will bring you from the far north and send you against the mountains of Israel. Then I'll strike your bow from your left hand and make your arrows drop from your right hand. On the mountains of Israel you will fall, you and all your troops and the nations with you. It's going to be weird. Like, no one's going to understand how it's happening. I will give you as food to all kinds of carrion birds and to the wild animals. You'll fall in the open field, for I have spoken, declares the sovereign Lord. So this is interesting. We're here in Ezekiel, and it's talking about the end times once again. I will send fire on Magog and on those who live in safety in the coastlands, and they will know that I am the Lord. I'll make known my holy name among my people Israel. I will no longer let my holy name be profaned, and the nations will know that I, the Lord, am the Holy One in Israel. It is coming. It will surely take place, declares the sovereign Lord. This is the day I have spoken of. Then those who live in the towns of Israel will go out and use weapons for fuel and burn them up. The small and large shields, the bows, the arrows, the war clubs and spears, for 7 years they'll use them for fuel. They will not need to gather wood from the fields or cut it from the forests, because they'll use the weapons for fuel, and they'll plunder those who plundered them and loot those who looted them, declares the sovereign Lord. On that day, I will give Gog a burial place in Israel, in the valley of those who travel east of the sea. It will block the way of travelers, because Gog and all his hordes will be buried there. So it will be called the Valley of Hamon Gog. On that day, for 7 months, the Israelites will be burying them in order to cleanse the land. All the people of the land will bury them, and the day I display my glory will be a memorable day for them, declares the sovereign Lord. People will be continually employed in cleansing the land. They will spread out across the land, and along with others, they will bury any bodies that are lying on the ground. After the 7 months, they will carry out a more detailed search. As they go through the land, anyone who sees a human bone will leave a marker beside it until the gravediggers bury it in the valley of Hamon Gog, near a town called Hamana, and so they will cleanse the land. You know, I'm almost wondering if this is about the 6-day war when the nations came against Israel. I don't know. We'll look it up. Son of man, this is what the sovereign Lord says. Call out to every kind of bird and all the wild animals. Assemble and come together from all around to the sacrifice I'm preparing for you. The great sacrifice on the mountains of Israel. There you will eat flesh and drink blood. We need to look this up. You will eat the flesh of mighty men and drink the blood of the princes of the earth, as if they were rams and lambs and goats and bulls, all of them fattened animals from Bashan. At the sacrifice I'm preparing for you, you will eat fat till you're glutted and drink blood till you're drunk. At my table, you will eat your fill of horses and riders, mighty men and soldiers of every kind, declares the sovereign Lord. I will display my glory among the nations, and all the nations will see the punishment I inflict and the hand I lay on them. From that day forward, the people of Israel will know that I am the Lord their God, and the nations will know that the people of Israel went into exile for their sin, because they were unfaithful to me. So I hid my face from them and handed them over to their enemies, and they all fell by the sword. I dealt with them according to their uncleanness and their offenses, and I hid my face from them. Therefore, this is what the sovereign Lord says. I will now restore the fortunes of Jacob, Israel, and will have compassion on all the people of Israel, and I'll be zealous for my holy name. They will forget their shame and all the unfaithfulness they showed toward me when they lived in safety in their land with no one to make them afraid. When I have brought them back from the nations and have gathered them from the countries of their enemies, I will be proved holy through them in the sight of many nations. Then they will know that I am the Lord their God, for though I sent them into exile among the nations, I will gather them to their own land, not leaving any behind. I'll no longer hide my face from them, for I will pour out my spirit on the people of Israel, declares the sovereign Lord. Okay, so we're going to go to Ezekiel 39 in enduring word, and we're going to look up that passage and just get an idea of what's going on here, because that's just too weird about eating horses. And of course I think of the horses eating horses and instead of eating the flesh of men and drinking their blood. All right, so we're going to look that up right now really quick. Okay, so Pastor Guzik says, excuse me, I'm going to sneeze. Excuse me. Excuse me. You know, this whole year has been one of just sinus issues. And, you know, I mean, all year, everybody's been sneezing and, you know, coughing. All right, this says the disposal of Gog and the cleansing of Israel. Let's go down to verse 17, where it starts talking about eating all of this. It says, defeated Gog as a grotesque sacrificial feast. And then it reads it, you know, drink blood till you're drunk, blah, blah, blah. It says, speak to every sort of bird, to every beast of the field. That's one line. It says the section dealing directly with Gog and his allies ends with this strange and grotesque picture of bird and beast scavengers feasting upon the corpses of the defeated enemy. And then it goes to gather together from all sides to my sacrificial meal. It says the strange and powerful picture is further developed as it was customary to often eat a ceremonial meal with an animal sacrifice. God considered this meal for bird and beast something of a sacrificial meal. The armies of Gog were like rams and lambs offered in sacrifice. Okay, I get it. So it's not man, he's saying, come to this sacrificial feast. He's not telling men to eat the corpses and drink the blood. He's telling the birds, the carrion birds, to come. He's saying, come to this feast and, you know, eat fat till you're glutted and drink blood. So he's talking to the birds, the carrion birds. Okay, I didn't realize that. And every beast of the field. So that is horrible, isn't it? It really is like a terrible picture to think about corpses and all of these beasts and birds eating them all. Okay, also, I want to go up here and see here. I just wanted to see if it mentioned what it was. I guess it's not the 6-Day War. I don't know. All right, so we cleared that up. We know that he's not telling people to come and sit down at a feast. He's telling carrion birds and beasts of the field, come and eat all the corpses, all the horses, everything of the slain and defeated enemy, okay? And instead of collecting the weapons and the shields that the enemy has left all over the battlefield, the Lord's saying, don't even keep them, just throw them in the fire and use them for fuel. So this is a very special moment in time, very particular, I should say, perhaps not special, but the Lord is going to show himself strong. So whether this is the end, or where it's at, I don't know. It would take some further study. So I love you very much, and I will see you tomorrow. We'll pick it up at Ezekiel 40. Love you. Bye-bye.